Hello everybody, how are you doing this fine evening? Let's see if everything is working, because I have resetted my PC and that wasn't the most smart thing to do, I guess. So everything is empty, and hopefully everything is working fine enough. If it is, please let me know in the chat, and then at least know. I see that things are working. Hello little brother, how are you doing this fine evening? Let's see. Also try to do dual streaming again via Twitch. There should be something coming up, but it doesn't look like it's working. Here we're hearing you. Nice, so that's good. Thank you for letting me know. As you can see, the design of the chat is also different, but it is what it is. It does look that the things are a little bit out of sync or something. I don't know. It could be good enough. Still, the Twitch doesn't work. Do I need to set up differently, perhaps? Let's see if we go to settings. Same and it's connected. So I would expect there to be something. Let me know if the if YouTube is getting slow. Then I will turn off the streaming for Twitch. Yeah, that's what it is, right? Testing out a little bit. How are you guys doing? I'm doing fine, and I'm very pleased today to dive in a little bit more into CSS. Last week we've dived into HTML, at least a little bit of the intro to understand how it works and how you can create it yourself and what you need to be aware of. Looks a bit more pixelated, but it's okay, I guess. All right. Thanks for letting me know. I will check afterwards as well. Could be that the YouTube Studio. I see that there's a difference. Playing game. What kind of game are you playing, little brother? Let me set up this one as well. So this one can be lower, so that's nice. But it looks like it's working. I reduced the resolutions for this live stream, and the reason being that YouTube said every time that the streaming settings weren't high enough. So I was like, all right, maybe if we turn down the streaming settings, that it will be fine. So let's look afterwards. But thank you for being here. I'll tell you, but I don't tell my friends. Ooh, I'm curious. A great cup of tea before we dive in. So as I said, last week we had explored HTML for a little bit, and nice. And if you want to see more of that, I can leave it in the chats. Let me quickly find it. And in that video, we explored about HTML, and HTML is something that you need to know and need to understand if you're working actually with creating websites. And if you don't understand those basics, let's pause that one. And if you don't understand the basics of HTML, then it would benefit you to understand how it works. The reason being is understanding the fundamentals makes it for you easy to transfer your knowledge into other page builders, because we're used to using Elementor or maybe Cadence, GreenShift, or Bricks Builder, or Builderus, or Blockera, or whatsoever. And it doesn't. And although it's very easy to understand how it works, those page builders, I mean, you are learning a tool and you're not learning the basics of the code. And that's why I am doing these sessions, the live lessons. Seems like there's less chat delay now with the lower resolution. Nice. So I was hoping that would help out with that one as well. So that's nice. So the lower resolution is good. Now the next thing is to get my Twitch to work because it doesn't look like I'm online. So yes, very good. And today we'll be diving into CSS. So yeah, why not? Let's start right off, right? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. It's different from HTML because you are adding styling. Let's see. Yes. Yes, I'm using OBS, but not a plugin. It is built in that you can select the YouTube selection kind of thing. So, and that's perhaps the difference. But CSS is Cascading Style Sheet. It's a short term for Cascading Style Sheet. And it is different from HTML because the language looks different. And also what you're using it for is different. Most of the time HTML and CSS are used intertwined because you can style HTML using CSS. And that's the reason why they're most of the time combined, used in wording. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. For the cascading part, we'll get into that later. For the style sheet part, it is actually helping you style your HTML. It's a way of creating a layout or a design in your website, and it reflects in the browser. CSS is used among all the browsers, and it used to be that you have different kind of interpretation between browsers, but nowadays they're quite similar. And CSS exists out of a lot of properties. If we go to my screen and go to one of my favorite websites, W3 Schools, we see that there's a lot of properties here on the left-hand side. All these things are properties that you can set for your cascading style sheets. And if you want to look and understand how it, let's click the dark mode. We're developers after all. And when you look in this example, this is how CSS looks. So you can change tags. You can change, for instance, the background color of a page. Now you see that this one's light blue. Let's change it to red. And when I press run, you see that we have a red background. This also can be done with different kind of things. For instance, your color, your text, alignment, your font family, using a different one, and your font size. Now, there's a lot of them, and I don't expect you to remember them all, but you will find that some of them are quite easy to understand, and the more you dive deeper into that, the more you know. Isn't it? All right, then I turn this off. Can I turn it off? The more you dive into it, the more you see that it can be very complex and you can create different kind of things. It's even still used to add some things in there. For instance, animation is a thing that recently has been added. So if we go to CSS animation, on scroll, like you see with the parallel effects, it's something that recently has been used more and more. 16 July 2024, you have CSS scroll animations, and that allows you to create all kinds of things. For instance, the scroll bar on top, it's done with CSS only. You can, and even I have played around a little bit with it using CodePen. Let's see, Daggy's reviews. And CodePen is a way to develop your website. I see that I don't see myself. Well, that's unfortunate. So in a nutshell, that is CSS, and that's all the properties there are. Now, what we can do is change Advanced Themer's website, because I think the title is a little bit boring. Could be made make more fun, for instance, by using Comic Sans. So we open up Inspector by right-clicking and then pressing Inspect. And then when we open it up, we can change the size of the inspector by hovering the mouse on the sides here. And when we search an HTML element, this one, we see that here H1 is set and here H1 is set. And here we see that a font family, so that's the kind of letter type they are using, kind of font they're using. And we can change it to our favorite one, Comic Sans MS. And as you can see, the title has now been changed. But also this title has been changed to Comic Sans. And I must say that I like this design much more. So Maxime, if you're watching this, please change your titles for Comic Sans. Or at least on Comic Sans Day. That would be nice. There's also other properties that you can set, like the font weight and color and those kinds of things, but we won't be diving into that right now. Besides those properties, you also have selectors. So, like I showed before, we have an H1, H2, an H3, an H4, 5, and 6. Those are all HTML elements with headings. And this is a direct correlation with, let me zoom in a little bit, the H1 element. So this is the HTML element, which you must know if you watched the previous episode. And here you have the selector. This is a element selection. And as you can see, when I hover over here, you have a little bit of specificity. Oh, I really can't pronounce that one. And it tells us that this selection is very specific because the last number is used and the last number states for how specific the changes are. Now you also have the ability to create classes. Now, how do you identify classes? Well, first of all, in HTML itself, you identify classes by the word class in the HTML tag. Now, how this is written, I can try and show you in here as well on the W3 Schools. So here we have our HTML. And if I want to add a class, I press space, type in class, and equals means that it gets that value. Then we open it up with a double quote and end it with a double quote as well. And we add, for instance, the name heading. Now, in our style, we want to manage properties for that heading. And what we can do is press dot. That means that we're selecting a class. A dot stands for classes. And a pound sign or hashtag nowadays is called an ID. And the differences between those two, that IDs can only be used once, at least it should be only used once to identify a specific element, and classes can be reused as many times as you want. So in this case, we want to add a class. We add a class of heading. As you can see, in the P tag, or with the P, you have a curly brackets. And that's how you open up and say to the browser, oh, this is the styling that I want for this heading. So if we want to change our heading, we can go to font family, which selects how this H1 looks, as you can see here as well. And if you put, I don't know what this is called, a double dots in there, if anybody can help me out what that is called, and type in your favorite font, of course, Comic Sans, and then close it with this tag, and then close the curly brackets, the same as the P tag. Now we have said to the browser, all right, I want my class heading, and here we have class heading, to have a font family or a letter looking like Comic Sans MS. And if we hit run, you see that our title is just made a little bit more beautiful. A colon, that's what it's called, thanks. And so this is how you add CSS, and how you add classes to them. Now, in the good old days, before page builders, you need to do this every time again. So if you want your paragraph, you can add text and then type in font family. Type in Comic Sans again. Add in the colon. And that's a semicolon, that's true. Thanks. And then to add in text. And you need to do this actually for everything you see on the website that you would like to change. So if we want to change the class, is text, and we hit run again, you see that now the paragraph is also a nice Comic Sans color. This also can be done with images that are styled differently. For instance, this image, it has a rounded border, because when we look at it, when we open it up, let's see, can we open it up? As you can see, they don't have any rounded border by default, but you can add that by using some CSS. And when we're looking in the CSS of the image tag, and we go on the right hand side, sometimes you need to search for what kind of value is set. Luckily, the browser has made this a little bit easier for us. When we go to compute it, we see all the stylings that is set for that specific image. So we see aspect ratio property is set, the border is set, and what we want to find is the border radius. And as you can see, here's the border radius set, which makes this tiny bit of round corner on the images. You also have other ways of selecting things. For instance, you can use a universal selector, and that's the asterisk. It selects everything. You can set a property to be important. This is for making something more specific. You can select attributes. You can select substrings, pseudos, but you can also combine those things. If you want to learn more about all the properties and selectors that are available, then I can suggest using something like w3schools.com, something like developer.mozilla.org. And recently, because you're watching YouTube, I saw that Kevin Powell on his YouTube channel has a way of adding courses. I didn't know that YouTube was being busy with adding that one. And if you select that one, there's the HTML and CSS course for absolute beginners.
Hello, my friend.
And Kevin Powell is the man if you're talking about HTML and CSS. So if you would like to learn more, then please go watch his videos. I will put a link in the description and in the chat as well. Let's see, where can I find my chat? There we go. Now, besides selectors, like the element, the ID and class that we just mentioned, you also have values and units that you can use. I even used this one as reference. And if we look at values and units, you have specific values. You can set numbers. For instance, let's open up W3Schools again. and our CSS, and let's try it yourself. So as you can see here, you have words like white for color or red or whatever, but you also have the value like this one in numbers. For instance, 20 pixels. The pixels is then a unit of measure. And some kind of dimension. You can also use percentages as your value. Now you can use absolute lengths as units. Usually you don't use them nowadays as much as you would like to, because everything is then fixed and you need to change it slightly depending on how big the browser is that you're looking into. So using relative values is easier in the end because you don't have to manage every size, every change on every aspect ratio or any browser size. Here you have relative unit lengths, and for instance EM or REM, VH or VW. And these 4 are the ones that I use the most. Now again, if you want to learn more, please look at Kevin Powell's videos. Here we can visually see that you set, gotta be responsive, that you set classes, and within those classes you can set different kind of values. And you can see that it is reflected in here. So here we have our HTML. We have a class called wrapper. And in the class wrapper, because remember it's set with a dot, wrapper, we have a font size of 1 EM. Now you might wonder, what is 1 EM? Well, I can tell you 1 EM is the font size of the browser. So usually it's set in 60 pixels, so 1 EM would be 16 pixels. Now you would wonder, why wouldn't you just say 16 pixels? Because if somebody like me has glasses and want a different kind of size for their fonts, because now I don't see anything, I can make my fonts bigger by zooming in. And when everything is set in pixels, it will stay in the same size. And that's something that's not very lovable. As we can see here, this is 200 pixels in size. This is 10 view width and 10 EM. Now we can play with it a little bit. I wonder if we can show it good enough. As you can see, this one for 200 pixels stays the same size. If you look at this one, this says 10 VW. It's the viewport size, so the size of my browser. And if I change the size of my browser, if my browser allows me to, this is awkward. Now usually you can change your browser. There we go. And as you can see, the box changes size depending on the size of the viewport or my browser. The rest of the values can also be seen on another link that I will send in the chat right now. So if you want to learn more about the values and units that are available and how you can use them, then you can look at that page and it will describe everything that you need to know. Now the most amazing example, if you ask me, is CSS Garden. They existed for a very long time, and as you can look, you can look, I hope, but as you can see, this is the default HTML, what it looks like. It looks a little bland and boring, and this is what actually is when you are not using any CSS. It just looks like this. It isn't anything else. But there are some links down here, and when we press that link, you see that suddenly the design changes. And this is all done using CSS. So now you can see the power of CSS and the difference also between CSS and HTML. CSS changes the look and feel of your website, and HTML is just the structure. the same exact structure is used throughout the website. They didn't change anything of that. So if you want to look at another one, for instance, Robot Army, a robot named Jimmy. This is also done with CSS. The images can be added with CSS and it looks very powerful. So I highly recommend looking at this one because it is fun to see that this still exists. I know this website since I was just a young kid trying out how CSS and that sort of things work. So it's fun to see that it's still available. That one logo seemed off center. This one, it is off center, as you can see. Clearly off center. I mean, if we just draw a line, we see that, and even when crooked, you can see that it's off center. On the previous page, could be so. So this was actually it for the CSS lessons and the things that I wanted to teach you in this course. 26 minutes, so I hope it's helped you out a little bit to understand just the basics of CSS, and if it does, then I would love to know. Leave me a comment down below. As a little bit of homework, I would like you to try out to create just an hero section. Now you might say, I'm not familiar with those terms. What is an hero section? Well, let's see if I can open up Figma for you and go to this scene because you can't see what I have in there, all of it. And let's change this back. Here are some hero sections. I will put it in the chat as well. You can see if you can recreate one hero section. I would say try something simple like this one. Try to add in a piece of text, another piece of text, another piece of text, and use the knowledge that you have also from previous video. Because do you know still the box model? Here we have a very big box with a tiny box in there, with a title box in there. Who really need to learn how to draw better. A button and another button. So this way you can see that this is a box model and how the structure should look like. And then you can give values. For instance, we want this to be suddenly my pen doesn't work. Sure, why not? So, can we set this one up? Absolute. Then we change this one to 0. Add a red stroke. Make it a little thicker. And as you can see, there's our title box. And there's a box down below there as well. So use the previous knowledge and this knowledge as well to design and create your first hero section and start off simple. Using the colors blue and also white if you would like to. But yeah, trying to set up those things. So Again, if this helps you, please let me know in the comments down below. And if it didn't, also let me know in the comments down below, so I know how and what I can improve next time. And I hope these 2 videos that I did during a live stream could help you out getting a little bit further with HTML and CSS. Yeah, sure. I can try to make it a hero. So let's go to install WP and log in. Or we can just code it ourselves, right? That would be even more fun. Let's also log in to my CodePen. And create a new remove those and then change those. It's a shame that my pen doesn't work anymore. Can we do it like this? Let's see if this worked. I can annotate, and I see reflected there as well. Nice. So resetting is pretty easy. So let's see how this works, right? I mean, I love the challenge. So what I first would do, there's double audio when you switch scenes. Very odd. Oh, am I just chatting? Let's see. Have I set up my mic to mice? No, talking head and the main camera. And chat. Already heads up. I will keep tabs of those. I can try to turn my mic down. Maybe that helps a little bit. Let me know, brother. All right, I will do so. No, so when you said switch screens, when I switch scenes, that's weird. All right, let's go for the breakdown of this section. So in here we have a section, and with the knowledge that we have gathered right now, we understand how we can at least do the box model first. So let's do that. We have a box right here. That is our text box. Here's another text box. Here's a paragraph. And here we have 2 buttons, which should be inside of a box. And this is also a whole section within a box that we can see. So how would I go around and make those? So we start off with a section. This section is the start of a section. In this case, it will be our hero section. Or our banner, as some people could call it. In there we have a div. Because the section would be the full screen size and the div would just have the tiny bit of size that the content needs to have. In there we put in the, let's see, span for our badge, success together. And we close the span as well. And we open up our H1, adapting and thriving. in a changing world. Get success together. And also let's close those tags. Then we can add in this as well. And I want to add in this P tag as a paragraph /P. Then we have a collection of our buttons. Now, as you can see, they're side by side. And if you remember from the previous video, you know that the buttons will always go from left to right, from top to bottom. And so we need to add a div that determines how this layout will flow. So, and we want it to navigate to another page. So then you use an A tag or anchor, and it is actually a link. So this is how you say, all right, I want this link to reference another page or another section of this page. And then we close. And then we type in get started, so the value. And then we close off the whole HTML tag. Next up is another button. So what we can do is just copy and paste this one in. Add learn more. And we don't have a direct arrow icon, so I will use a semicolon or a bigger than sign. And then close this HTML tag as well. Now, by default, this is how the HTML looks. And as you can see, it looks just a little bit different from the HTML right here. Now, what I want to know is what kind of font there is used. So are they using Plastiacarta? Just a little different. We called it a hero banner back in my day. A hero banner, nice. Long time ago, I guess, right? A hero banner. So, what do we want to do? As we can see, we have a section that is full width. And the full width is set automatically, so we don't have to change the section by default. For our div element, so div tag, we want this to have a certain kind of width. Now there are two ways to set a width. You can set a width right here. And then we say how big this needs to be. Usually people tend to use something like 1200 pixels. Or even less if needed, depending on your resolution. But as you can see, it's still on the left-hand side. So we need to change our default alignment for our section. We can do this by entering flex, by stating display, and then flex. And then, I don't know which one, align items, center, which tells the browser that the alignment should be center, but it could also be just the phi items, or even align content. So it's for me also a very long time ago that I've written this. And to be fair, display is for me still something that I need to get used to. Let's see. And that's the lovely thing about Google, right? We go to Flex Settings. And let's see what the Flex settings are. And this one from CSS Tricks, it used to be from Chris, but now somebody else is managing it from DigitalOcean. And Chris was really the guy that could write out this very well. Let's see, Flex. And we wanted to align item center. So that is right, but we want to justify the contents then. Let's see. Justify. Yeah, justify content in center. Content in center. And as you can see, now the div itself is centered. So if we add a background of red for the section and a background of blue for the div, you can see that the alignment is different for both of them. The section will be the full width, but the div will be 1200 pixels always. And as I stated earlier, this can be an issue, but we won't be looking into what's called responsiveness for now. We can do it by adding, now that I was thinking about it, doing something like this and add 100%, which makes the width 100%, but the width can maximum be of 1200 pixels. And as you can see, now it is already a little bit more responsive than it was before. Responsiveness. Next up, I'll love to add a little bit of spacing and make this white for now. That we still can see it, but doesn't look that ugly. Then we can do the same thing for this one, because we want all the contents of our div, so the heading, the paragraph, and the buttons to be centered in this div. So we again set display to flex and justify content to center. As you can see, everything is now put from left to right, and this is what flex does. So we need to change that, and we can do that by using the flex direction. And flex direction, you can set the direction to go to columns, and that's what we want, because we want everything to be on top of each other inside of this div. So flex direction of column. And now it's aligned from top to bottom. Now, changing the flex direction also means that we changed how the justify content works. Because the direction, it's still centering the things like before. Let's see. So we need to adjust them. And again, align items. I needed to figure out which one I needed to use. So that's why it's always good to use Google if you don't come across things that you don't understand yet or don't know anymore, because it was a long time ago, or just want to learn how to do this kind of things. So next up, we'll be adding a color. So we can use the brand color right here for our badge. And that is our span for in this instance. So for our span, we want to use a color, and that's the nice color here. And as you can see, it slightly changes. Also, we can make this look good for our text writing. Now, as you can see, I on purpose removed the capitals, because we can do that using CSS. So if we go in here, and again, I don't fully remember how to set this up. I've been using Elementor, Cadence, and Brixbuild and that sort of thing so many times that I don't even think about how to do those things. Because just like in Figma, you have some kind of settings that you can just press and you can set, all right, this needs to be this kind of color or change or this kind of size. And all those things are separate settings in CSS. And I used to remember them, but it is such a long time ago that I don't remember them all by heart anymore. Let's see. So for our capitalize. And that's why Google is coming in handy. Ooh, nowadays you have Google, or you have something like Copilot or Chrome, right? Let's see. In CSS, how do you capitalize? I mean, there's a Google. Why remember? Yeah. Well, I can one up you there, brother, because why use Google if you can use Copilot straight from your browser? It's already available here just by using Edge and then clicking Copilot. And here we have your answer. So we set text transform, which transforms our text, and then capitalize. Capitalize. There we go. This should do it. Doesn't look like it's working. And there we go. If we write it in the correct way, we have capitalized letters. As you can see, it's not reflected in our HTML. The HTML looks clean. We don't have every other first letter being capitalized. But we fixed that in our CSS. And that is where CSS comes in handy, because you can style everything and make it look like the way you want to. Now we're not done yet, because as you can see in our design, there's a border around it. So what we do is set a border of a size, and the size could be 1 pixel. We want it to have a solid, so a color that is not interrupted by anything. And we want to use the same color as this one. Now what we can do is copy the color and paste it in here. Luckily, nowadays there's a way to make our lives easier. So what we can do is go all the way up. Type in, what was its name? How it looks like. It is called a semicolon. Type in root. Then have the curly brackets. And now we can set variables. So we can set a variable for the color C, primary, and that should be this value. Now everywhere in our document we can reference this variable. So if we scroll down just a tiny bit, go in here, type in var, and this is what you also see in Bricks Builder. Paste it in there and do the same thing on another place and save it. You see that the color didn't change here, and that the references are still the same. So if we want to change the color, we can change it just in one place. And this is, as you can see, now it turns red because we typed in red. If you type in blue, it becomes blue. Hi there, Anjevik. I don't see your things coming up everywhere, but good day to you. Lovely that you're here. Ah, now it is. It took a little time. Thank you for joining. So that's how you set up variables. So variables can be seen as classes for inside of your CSS that are reusable values that you can use throughout your CSS. We can also add a border radius, which means the curvings or the roundness of your boxes. For instance, 1 em. And this should be a lot of curving. And as you can see, it looks a little bit similar like this one. And we also would like to add a padding. The padding is the spacing, the white space, or the extra space that the text gets inside. So margin is for pushing things outside, further away, and padding is pushing things inside. So it makes things tinier. I hope this does make sense. Let me know if it didn't. And we can set the value of 1 EM here as well. As you can see, there's a lot of spacing. So what we can do is change the value a little bit. Now this looks a little bit better. This looks great. But as you also can see, I don't like the spacing all around to be the same. Because in the sides it feels very tight, and the top and bottom feels that it has a little bit more breathing room. So as a rule of thumb, usually we have we have the left and right side, the padding, twice as much padding as the top and bottom one. So for instance, this one should be 0.2 EM. And maybe this time we even go a little bit further. So this is the shorthand code for top and bottom and left and right side. You can also write them separate by adding 4 values in there, but I like to write shorthand where I can, because it just doesn't cost a lot of value. Squishing it together. Yes, makes sense. Thanks. So now we have our first tag setting up. Now we also need to add our typography plus Jakarta Sans. And if I remember correctly, this is a Google. I'm sorry. Jakarta Sans. A Google font. So let's open up Google Fonts. And let's get the font and use the embed code. Now we want everything. There we go. And what we can do is import the font from this URL, because then we can use it inside of our CSS. So we go in here and add it in here. And this is for using the Jakarta Sans. So we can plus Jakarta CSS class for variable style. Now we don't need to use it for variable style, but we want to use it, the font family. And we want to use it, I think, everywhere, right? Yeah, it is set everywhere. So if you want to set something globally, not just for a specific section, but for your whole website, you can set it on the HTML section, which I usually don't do. I usually set something that's global on body. Font family. We set it up like this. And hopefully it's imported correctly. It doesn't look like it. Do we need to set it on HTML? If I remember correctly, it doesn't make... because it has font family twice. There we go. We can change this to body again. And there we have our changes. Now I also see that the text here is a little bit smaller than ours. So we can change the span size. We do that by going to typing font minus size. And then have something like 0.8 rem, which is smaller than 1 whole rem. And as you can see, it already starts to look quite similar to our left-hand side. Now that we have had our span, we can also change our H1 or our heading. Font size 2em or even bigger. Now it is left aligned and we want everything to be centered. So we need to change that and we type in text align, which means that we align the text in the center. And there we go. And let's also see if there's any other value. It's 72. And this is where calculation comes in. So 72 divided by 16 is 4.5. So now it is 72 pixels and it is looking the same. Now the text is also transformed from every other letter to be capitalized, but not the and one. So in this case, it's better to change those things in the H1 itself. Semi-bold too. Yeah. So we can change the font weight. Very good that you mentioned this. To semi-bold. And sometimes it doesn't work, and then we need to add a value, and the value is how bold something is. And this can be between 100 and 900, with 900 being very thick and 300 being less thick. And the higher the number, the thicker the letters. So bold. Next up would be to change the color of this text. I didn't know. Nice that you're also learning something. So this piece of text is the P tag. And we type in the color. And then the value. And there we go. It's now lighter. But also the size is different. As you can see, it's more tighter than the other one. And what we can do is set up the width to be something like 230 CH. And CH stands for the 0 character of the font being used. So if I would type in 0, CH will try to fit in 30 zeros alongside of this width to fit in all the letters that are fitting in there. It still looks a little bit too tight, so we can change it up to be bigger. Maybe even more. This is a little bit too much. And as you can see, you can just play around a little bit with it. And then we can add a text align center. And now this is also nicely center aligned. Now for the last part, we are having perfect. We have 2 buttons. And what we need to... So there's a difference between those 2 buttons, right? And one button, but they also have some similar things. So the similar things are the border radius, so the curvature of the button itself, the font size, the font type that is used, and also the spacing between the text and the outer side of the button. So what we can do is make those general changes in our defaults, like the A. In here we can set the border border to be visible. So we can set a border of 1 pixel, solid and black, so that we add just a border. Then we add a border radius. Border radius, for instance, 0.2 em. Maybe just a little bit more, 0.4. That looks better. And now we want to change the spacing inside of the button. So we add a padding, because that's the changing inside the button. And we add a, let's see, 0.2 em. 0.2 em to change the spacing all around. Maybe this even needs a little bit more. So we're now changing the top and the bottom one, but also the left and right one simultaneously. And we want to change it up just a little bit to give it just a little bit of breathing room from the left and right side and to the top and bottom side. As you can see this already looks better. And they all look the same. They have the same, what's it called? Spacing from top and bottom, but also from left and right. So setting up the things that you're going to reuse for every button every time in an A element is a smart thing to do, because then you can just reuse it. We also don't want to have a underline. And this is a text decoration, because it's a nice decoration that it gets. And we set that one to none. Now it's been removed, so we don't get any decoration. And I also think that the type is a little bit smaller than as shown in here. So we can change the font size to 0.8 em, for instance. And if we hit save and take a sip, you can see the width changing the font size. Also, our spacing is changing. So if we change this one to 10, there's a lot of more spacing. But if we change this to 1, the spacing also shrinks. And this is why using EM is very nice to do, because it looks at the spacing that it has from a specific element, looks at the font size, and the font size changes the value, the spacing in this case, for the border radius and the padding as well. So, big sip. Yeah. Getting very what's called, dry in the mouth. Lovely, by the way, fresh thyme tea. So if you like tea, give that a 1 spin. And now we get a little bit of a challenge, because we have 2 buttons, but they are looking different. Also, we have used a div in here. So if you collapse this by clicking a tiny little arrow around the digit 2, you can collapse everything. So we have a div in here. And if we collapse all of the other ones, we also have a div in here. But we want both of them to do something very different. Our second div needs to have a different kind of value. So how do we change that? We can do that by adding a class. A class is for specifically that element that we have selected. So you can select a specific HTML element you want to do changes to instead of doing it globally. So for every div we will add, the background will be white, the width will be 100%, the max width will be 1200 pixels, and the display will be flex with a line to the center and have the direction to column. But for this specific div, we don't want that to happen, because we want the buttons to be side by side. So what we can do is add a name. And the naming convention we usually use nowadays is called a BAM naming convention, which stands for block element modifier. A block in this case would be the hero section, because it's our hero block, and the element is our button wrapper, because it's wrapping our buttons. So we don't want to modify anything specific, so we can leave that as is. So our class should be hero and then button wrapper. Or it needs to be written even like this. I don't know by heart. You can look it up. You can Google it. And then, or use Copilot. And then we can use this name inside our div to define that we only want to target this div. And what do we want to change? We want to change the flex direction to row. And as you can see, now it changed it to row. We also want this to be the minimal size it can have. So we change the width. We can set it to a nice new value. It's called min-content, which makes sure it's the minimum size of the content. But we don't want it to be the minimum size. We want it to be the maximum size. So we change the min to max. And there we go. Now it's the maximum size. What I don't like is that the buttons are close up. Now, there's two ways you can solve this. One is by adding a margin, which, if you remember, changes the spacing that's around an element, so on the outside. Let's take 12 pixels. And now it has some margin on the left. Both of them have margin on the left and right, and top and bottom. So if we add another HTML element in here, for instance, another button, you see that it gets the same margin. But what I like to do more, because it's the white space that we want to use for this section, is to add a gap. So we can set a gap, for example, 1 EM. And there we go. This is 16 pixels between them. And if you add another one, it will also get another one. Hi, Todor. I'm doing pretty fine. How are you doing this fine evening? And now, lastly, I want to change the colors for our buttons. So we go in here. We can add a class for our buttons. Now, the BAM methodology would say that we need to address this as a hero button wrapper, but the button can also be used somewhere else. So we can change it to be using something like primary dash button, or the way I like it to have is button primary. And then we can type in background for the color of the background, of the button. And as we have used earlier, here we have our root, which is our variable. Type it in there. And now it has changed the color. Now the text itself is not readable, so we need to change that as well by setting the color to white. And there we go. It looks quite similar, right? And it's nice here. I'm just thinking of what I could do. So I saw that you are live, and now I'm happy. Thank you, Todor. Nice to hear that you are happy seeing my live. Yeah, around 8:15, right? You can always join my live stream. And there's a lot to watch and to learn in this live stream, to be fair. First CSS, and now we're building out this section using HTML and CSS. It's nice to diving into CSS, by the way. It is a long time ago that I have been looking into the newer kind of things, like flex direction. Although it's pretty old already, I haven't used it that much. The same goes for using the newer values like max content and that sort of things. So it's nice to do this once more. Very educational. Nice. The next step will be to be very valuable. And that's where I'm going towards, by the way. Trying to add more value to the things that I create instead of just educating. The last thing we need to do is to change our other button. And we can do that. Let's see. I want to know what kind of colors has been used. And so we can copy this one in. And for our ghost button ghost, we can use a background for this color. No, it shouldn't be background because the background should be white. And you can write white like white, or you can use hashtag and 3 Fs. Press F in the chat. And then it would work. And then we can change the color to this color. And you would say, well, you already defined a border in the A tag, which is this one, right? But how do you change the color later? Well, you can change the specifics of a CSS element by overriding it. And that's where the cascading comes in. So everything that's higher up in the document is used first, and everything that comes afterwards is placed on top of that. So it's overriding the value it had before. So for instance, if we want to change the border and then the color specifically, we can do it like this. And if we hit save and add our class inside of our ghost button and hit save again, you see that the color has been changed. I see that the background is off-white, so we can change that one as well. And that the text has a different color, so we can use it as well. Now, I do think this is the main text that's used everywhere. And if we can use it everywhere, we can just make the changes in our body so it changes everywhere as well. And let's see. Now, if we save this, you see that it still turns blue. And this is because the way the color is for links. The links should be a different color. So we need to override that one. And because we're reusing it, it's a very good practice to go to the place where you've edited it, copy it, and set it as, perhaps we want this to be our font primary. Maybe we can set FT for font. And then in here, we type in the var, remove those, and now we can reuse the color on every place that we are using the same color again and again. As you can see, there's our color. Now we have approximately made our hero section, and I am streaming already 1 hour and 50 minutes. And I think that's good enough for now. So now you have seen how I've built this hero section, and if you want to try it out too, please use the this UI and try to create that one as again yourself. And just pick one of those easiest ones, one of these 4, to recreate. It doesn't need to be 100% the same, but if you want to, you can do that. But I would love to challenge you, if you are interested in to understanding HTML and CSS, start with these basic things. It's very easy to do. Yeah, don't hesitate and just do it. So with that, I want to thank you all for watching. If you liked this live stream and it helped you out, I would tremendously be grateful for you if you leave a comment down below to let me understand what I did wrong, what I did good, or if it didn't help you, what I did wrong and what I can improve next time. And I thank you all for being here, Brother and Todor, and Brother also, quite possibly also other people. And I will see you on the next live stream. As always, keep designing and see ya.